beautiful podcast. My name is Evelyn, and with me we have...
I'm Kristen.
Summer.
Jaden.
And this is the Girls Takeover episode, guys. I am so excited that we're able to do this episode. I don't know if y'all remember, this has been like a month or two that we've been planning this.
Yes.
Yeah, it's been.
We've met, how long was it we met? We met and
I feel like
figured out-
over 2 months. I
That's
feel,
really
like, I feel like it's been over 2 months.
Because we met and we were trying to figure out like what we were going to talk about, and then we like decided, and we went through like all the kind of like figuring out, ooh, this person with that person, this and that, and then it never went anywhere. It was like constant back and forth of like, okay, we're going to film or we're not going to film. Okay, we're going to film, we're not going to film. Are y'all ready to film?
Well, I think we were going to film at that place in Covington, and then they shut down, right? So that's like originally what put the pause on it.
Oh,
Yes.
Yeah. And then, so now we've just been waiting.
Which also I would like to add, when we did this episode, first off, our title of our episode is Waiting, Dating, and Married. All of us are in different seasons of relationships, and so we thought it'd be a really cool idea to focus on each of our seasons and talk about how to keep Christ at the center of those seasons. And it was really funny when we all first like got together and did it. I was dating. You were engaged, right? You were.
I think I was
engaged.
married already.
Were you married already? Are you
Yeah.
sure?
Yeah.
Oh, well, sorry. I was engaged. I am now engaged.
Yeah.
I was dating.
So now we officially
Yours
have
is the only
different-
one
Yeah.
that was
Sorry,
changed.
maybe
Yeah.
I'm the one that
That's
changed.
exactly why it took so long. I was literally waiting for this moment.
Oh, yeah.
Because now we have, a waiting season, right? Waiting,
Mm-hmm. Waiting.
engaged,
Dating, engaged.
married with kids. That's pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go ahead and start out with a verse. Colossians 3:1. Since then you have been raised with Christ. Set your hearts on things above where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things above, not on earthly things. For you died, and your life is now hidden with Christ in God, which I just like to have that verse kind of just open us up in that, our relationships, and we are all focused on Him, and, just kind of have that verse to open us up. But for our first question, I kind of just want to do like an easy little question here just to kind of break the ice. What are just some things that we should be searching for in a godly partner? Anybody wants to go first?
Not all at once. Well, okay. I'm not obviously like in a dating season at the moment, but like for me, I think obviously like it comes down to like morals and standards. And so like I think having a good like standards list of like what are your standards of like what you want in a person? Like what are their morals and do they align with your morals? Like obviously, you want someone that's a God-fearing woman or a God-fearing man. And so that's, for me, that's one of the top things that I look for is obviously you have to serve the Lord. And then two, like, do they meet my standards? Like, obviously, we don't want to have like this unrealistic, list of things,
right.
but like, what are their morals? What do they believe in? Do I believe in the same things? Like, can our lives, like, just be cohesive and go together? Can we work together? Or is this just, this is not going to work out? So that's me personally, what I look for in a Christ-centered relationship.
Yeah, that's good.
I think I'll add being equally yoked.
That's a good one.
I mean, kind of like a big thing to search for in a partner, especially when you are wholeheartedly living your life for Christ, is having someone that is also doing that is not going to be in a relationship that's going to tempt you to fall. And the verse 2 Corinthians 6:14 says, "Do not be yoked together with unbelievers. For what do righteousness and wickedness have in common, or what fellowship can light have with darkness?" So I think it's just, I like that verse to just emphasize on, like, it is showing that there's opposites of living your life for Christ and not living your life for Christ. I think, you can have someone and help someone get their life to Christ, but are you going to be doing life with someone that has, like, no relationship with Him and being equally yoked in that way?
I think for me, too, like, something to add is, like, consistency. Like, someone that's going to be the same no matter who they're around, and they're going to show, oh, my gosh. They're going to show their character.
What's going on?
Get choked up there.
Anyway, they're going to show their character is the same whether they're around their friends, their family, or, like, just you.
Yeah.
That's a really good one.
Yeah. It's hard for me to answer this question because whenever I found my husband, I wasn't necessarily looking for a godly partner. He kind of just found me, and God just kind of showed up in that. So it's different, and I really enjoy seeing and hearing all you guys' answers to that question.
Awesome. I'm going to go to our next question here. this is like a really good one that we can kind of dwell on for a minute, is differences between beginning a godly relationship compared to a worldly traditional dating. I think I kind of just want to focus on the differences that the world puts on relationships versus what godly relationships are. And I think, of course, there's some like main things with like intimacy and, you know, the foundation of where you're starting, but like just what y'all have to add on those kind of things.
Yeah.
Kristen?
Well, okay, I guess I'll go. I think you really kind of like touched on the main thing of like the intimacy part, and I think in like worldly relationships, a lot of people rush through each step of the season.
Yes.
Like they don't get to know each other. They start the first date immediately. They are intimate very quickly. Like that's not how you would do it in like a godly relationship. I mean, Curly and I dated for almost 6 years before we like got engaged and got married, and so like we were tempted and like we had to withstand the temptations. So that's what I would say.
Absolutely. I think intimacy is a big thing. And I think also, like, for a personal thing, for, like, me, what me and Steven did, we did the 90-day commitment, kind of like the 90-day rule of having 90 days of strictly talking and not, like, calling each other boyfriend and girlfriend, not going on a date like a boyfriend and girlfriend, like, strictly like we are talking, we're still friends. Of course, we know we like each other and we have feelings, but it's like, I'm not going to call you my girlfriend and I'm not going to call you my boyfriend until, like, those 90 days are there. And I really like that because I feel like in a worldly way, like you were saying, it's so rushed. It's like, get into the relationship, go be dating, and then also just throw yourself into marriage. It's like, let's just pause and take a moment and slowly go through it. And I think it was really cool because for me, sticking to that 90-day commitment, I knew going into the relationship that, man, Steven already committed to 90 days of just talking to me. I know that there's already a foundation of commitment with dating or with the future of marriage, engaged. But I just knew that there was like, okay, I already had a foundation of commitment first and foremost before we even started dating, which I thought was like a really cool thing to do for anyone, you know, who wants to try that out. I loved having that. We're sticking to 90 days. And when that 90 day comes, you get excited because it's like, oh, I get to be his girlfriend now. Waited long enough, you know?
Right.
So I just had that like pausing and waiting kind of moment and to dwell in it instead of just rushing into something so fast.
Yeah, and I also think that the 90-day thing kind of strips away distractions. It strips away from your main focus of what is a relationship and what are we doing with this. So that's really good too.
I think for me personally, you know, being someone that is like, you know, been in a worldly relationship versus like a godly one, for me, I think the biggest difference was, yes, intimacy, but also like identity. Because I feel like a lot of times, like in a worldly relationship, like people root their identity in the other person's identity because they're not secure in themselves. And so they're looking for the relationship to fulfill them in a way. And obviously it can't. Whereas like a godly relationship, most of the times, I would hope so, that you were already secure in the Lord and you have your identity, you know, founded upon the Lord, so that whenever you go into the relationship, you're not looking for your identity in this person, but you're so founded in the Lord and he is so founded in the Lord that, you know, you can serve the Lord together and you're not, you know, arguing or getting jealous or, you know, having assumptions of the other person, you know, doing something that they're really not doing because you're insecure. Yeah. You're secure in the Lord, so you know your identity as a daughter or as a son, and they know their identity, and so now you kind of cut out, you know, those arguments that worldly couples kind of have when it comes down to like insecurity and comparison. Not saying that you won't have those things in a godly relationship to an extent, because you will. Yeah. But it just comes down for me to being rooted, like wholly rooted in the Lord and secure in your identity.
Yeah, because it's like, how are you going to be secure in a relationship if you're not even secure in Him?
Exactly.
I think that's a really big thing. My train of thought just left me. But I also had I was reading an article about like godly relationships, just kind of like doing a little research, and
Oh my gosh.
wasn't doing that much research.
Tell us about it.
And tell us. But it was they were talking about how like the difference of like emphasis there is on relationships between worldly and godly. They were saying how I just got choked up there too. You saw that? It just came out. But the emphasis I feel like worldly relationships do, it's so physical. It's, you know, the attraction that you get
Yeah.
from the person, the chemistry that you're getting right off of that person, the feelings and everything. And I think for that, it's like, you know, it's not to be kind of like a little negative, but I feel like those things fade. Like the chemistry can fade, the attraction can fade. I mean, I'm not going to look 20 forever. I wish I could, but I'm not. But it's like those things will fade. And so it's how can I be secure in, you know, my partner if they were only basing on attraction or chemistry that we had in one moment or a feeling that they had because, you know, the honeymoon phase in a relationship, you know, having that fade and fleet. And my phone's not loading for me. At a verse, Proverbs 31:30 says, "Charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised." And I thought that just kind of like emphasized on that emphasis of like, emphasize on that emphasis. Take that back again. Emphasize on emphasis. About the attraction and chemistry and those things can like fade, but in a godly relationship, you know, yes, attraction is a part of it. You know, you're not going to date someone that you're not attracted to in general, or in a chemistry and a feeling, but it's like that in a godly relationship, I feel like it takes those base things and it just makes it even more and like even grows in it and dwells in it even more than just a basis attraction or a basis chemistry.
Right.
It's like, man, I'm doing life with this person. I'm not just hanging out with this person because I like you and you like me and we have little feelings for each other. But it's like, man, I'm continuing my life with you. I'm making big decisions with you. I'm seeing how my future is gonna dwell with this person.
Yeah.
And to be one in a marriage in a sense, that's like even the crazier stuff to talk about the future is like you're gonna be one day. And so I thought that was cool, just talking about the emphasis of like how worldly people put upon versus how godly relationships are put upon in that way.
Right. And with Daisy and I coming up on 10 years of marriage, you were talking about attraction fading and stuff like that. And I can say that in a 10-year marriage, you know, when you have kids and jobs and homeschool and there's so many things that is really hard to like maintain. But I will say that, you know, knowing your identity in Christ and also just having a godly relationship and two are seeking the one, the Lord, you know, it's really easy. That makes your partner more attractive to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, because I
Absolutely.
like me and Daisy will go through moments where I'm just like, dude, I'm just so sick and tired of him, bro. You know. But then we have moments where it's like we're together in one with the Lord, and it's like the attraction goes right back up. So I don't think that attraction necessarily fades, but I think the Pastor Mike has actually said this before. If you take a triangle, right, and Daisy's on one side, Summer's on the other side, the closer we get to God, the closer we get to each other, and that works
Yes.
for our intimacy, attraction,
Yes.
and all of it. Do we need a pause?
No, you're good. Keep going.
Cool.
You know, if the light messed us up.
Yeah.
All right.
Y'all look good in the camera. The lights look great.
Noise.
Sweet. Go.
Okay. I actually definitely like that. I love that you brought up the triangle thing because I feel like that was like, you know, like when you hear someone say something, it's like you're hearing it for the first time, and it's like those things like stick with you. And I remember Pastor Mike talking about the triangle thing, and I was like, man, that like, and I've like heard it before, but like it was like at a Sunday, I think he mentioned it or talking about maybe
Right.
something or marriage counseling. I don't remember what it was that prefaced the triangle thing, but I just remember hearing it, and I was like, that is so true. It's like you're on one and the other, but the closer you are to God, the closer you are to Him. And you know, and He's spoken on that on many Sundays. I think it kind of all revolves back. We're all relational people with friendships, your family, even with your partner. We're relational beings. You know, we have to have relationships to function
Yeah.
because we're not supposed to do it alone. And so the triangle reference is like I think a beautiful way to look at it. It's literally when you grow closer to Him with your partner, you will grow closer with your partner. I think that's a really beautiful way to put it in that way. So I was like, someone brought the triangle.
Yeah, girl.
Nice.
I got you.
Diagram. So what do you think is like some of the biggest struggles each of y'all have faced in your specific season and for the searching and trying to maintain that godly foundation, godly relationship at the first and foremost? What are some like struggles y'all faced?
Okay. I think for me, Carl and I are just always busy people. And so as we've progressed in our relationship, it's just got busier and busier. And so being married now, you think like you have all this time to be with each other, but you really don't.
Yeah.
And especially like he's in ministry and like we're both working or like volunteering for ministry. So we may see each other a lot doing ministry work, but like when it comes down to it, we see each other maybe a few hours a day
Yeah.
to really be with each other. And so I think just like busyness of life kind of takes away from like our own personal relationship.
Yeah.
And so my thing is like we love serving in our ministries, and like it's great to be like connected to our church and like our youth. But like we don't want to let just ministry work get in the way of like our ministry to each other.
Yeah.
That's super
That's
good.
good.
Really, really good.
Throw a couple of kids in the mix and it gets really crazy.
We got a dog, and that's enough right now.
You're right. They are. They're a little bit harder to maintain, in my opinion. Yeah.
Dogs or the kids?
Dogs, for sure.
Keep that in mind. Kid first, then a dog.
Yeah. Maybe.
But I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, but I was just gonna add to what you said. It is really hard. My phone keeps timing out because I don't know how to make my display stay up. So the questions keep disappearing. But just maintaining a godly relationship is so crucial in marriage and dating, period. But it's so hard. You know, I feel like all of my energy and time these days in the season that I'm currently in goes towards my children. Like even when I'm at church on Sunday, like I'm constantly like thinking like, are they okay? What are they doing? And so a lot of times I can easily let that get in the way of mine and Daisy's relationship. I'm too tired, you know, to stay up and talk and hang out and read the word together, or I'm too tired to worship with you because you know Daisy's always about worship. Or I'm too tired for this. But I think that it's so important and so crucial in a godly relationship to make time, just carve out time. And I don't remember where I heard this one time. It was at a marriage conference, but somebody said that just like in our day-to-day lives, we write stuff down in our daily planners, like, hey, don't forget to do this, or you have a meeting with so-and-so at 2:00. Make appointments with your husband or your partner to spend time with the Lord, and put it on the calendar. And you know, like, hey, like tomorrow at 3 p.m., like no matter what, we have to do this. This is something we're going to do. And that is really helpful too.
I would like to just add, like, for a question of you, because you and Daisy both are worship leaders for Seekers. How is that, like, you know, being married and also both leading a, like, worship team at a church? Like, y'all are in y'all's own ministry both. So it's not like one's in ministry and one's not. It's like y'all are both together in the same ministry in that way. How is that, like, for, like, in the marriage aspect, like, as a couple, doing that, leading?
I feel like it could be hard, just like finances in a marriage are hard. Trying to maintain ministry together in a marriage is super, super hard. And once again, with the kids and stuff on top of it, it's just really, really hard. But Daisy and I have been leading worship together for, God, I don't even want to calculate it because I'm going to sound really old. But since I was 17, and I'm 29 years old now. So we've been leading worship together for a very, very long time. So we've kind of learned how to just navigate life. But once again, just being super intentional about it. We literally have meetings during the week where we mark a time where we're like, okay, we're going to plan stuff. We're going to plan songs this day. It doesn't always happen. Y'all call me out on that. But I think being intentional is and having a spirit of excellence is a big deal in every aspect of your life, for sure. So,
That's really, really good.
I don't know if that answered your question or not.
I mean, I think it did.
Yeah.
Jane, for you, any, like, the struggles of the, like, the waiting?
Yeah, honestly, I think the biggest thing that I've like faced in the waiting season is comparison. And that I feel like that in a lot of ways has like distracted me from even like what the Lord wants to do in my life during the waiting. Because especially like whenever I first entered a waiting season, like I had 4 best friends that had gotten engaged and married within like 6 months. And I was within all of those weddings. And so like during that time, I'd gotten like very bitter at the Lord because I was like, how dare you like call me into a waiting season and then you're gonna, you know, allow me to be in all of these weddings and like I'm surrounded by all of these people that are getting everything that I want and I feel like it's being stripped away from me or like being withheld from me in a sense. So for the longest time I was kind of angry at the Lord. And so that's kind of where I struggled in my season of waiting. But then I kind of start to like switch my perspective of like, Lord, instead of asking like, Lord, why am I in this season? Like, how come everyone's getting what I want? I start to ask the question of, Lord, what are you trying to teach me in this season? And so whenever I switch my perspective from why to what, it really kind of gave me the confidence to continue forward in the waiting season. Like, obviously, there have been times that I've compared, and, the enemy will fill my mind with doubt and lies. But then I have to recenter and remind myself, like, there is a purpose that I'm in this waiting season, and I'm not waiting in vain. Because Lamentations 3, the Lord says, good things come to those who wait.
Yes.
And so I know that if I'm waiting, it's because the Lord genuinely has his best for me. And so I think, comparison, there, along with like fear of not being good enough, fear of always being alone, or just all of these fears that a woman would have of, fear of not being a wife one day, fear of not being able, to be a mother. And so all of these fears, but I think the biggest struggle that I've had is comparison. But I think to combat that is just being secure in knowing the Lord really does have good things for me, and he's not withholding anything, but it's genuinely because, he has his best at heart for me. And sometimes that looks like waiting sometimes. So.
And I love, like, in the waiting seasons, especially when it's just like you and you almost feel like alone. It's like almost those moments where it's like God wants you to be alone just to be with like him. And so in those moments, it's like, man, it's like he's wanting all of you in those moments in that waiting season. It's like, I want all of you, and I want you to be with all of me. And it's like such a personal, I feel like you grow so much more personal with him in a waiting season. And I mean, even just from you talking about, here and there, just things going on in a waiting season, I could like hear when the way you're talking that you're having like breakthroughs and moments of just connecting with him that, you didn't even know that you were connecting with him and like, or have connected with him before. So that's like a really, really cool just like aspect of a waiting season to think about.
Yeah.
I think for like me and like being dating and stuff, I've like struggled with, for like personally, I've only known worldly relationships. So I think a big thing for me, like starting in a like true God-centered like foundation on him relationship, was like having to unlearn the things that I thought before, like the expectations, or what we're doing in this relationship, where's this relationship going, or even just like having the talks about future. I always make this joke. Me and Steven laugh all the time about this. When Steven told me he liked me, he did a whole conversation of like, future in the first conversation of, hey, by the way, I like you, but also let's talk about our future. And I call it cold buckets. He's dumped quite a few on me before, so we laugh about it now. But we call them cold buckets. And also just talking about like talking about our past, and like my past is very different from his past, and that's just a truth that I've come to, is like I do have a different past of I've only known worldly relationships. I've only known worldly expectations of relationships through the intimacy, or to not even see a future in it. Like not to plan out a future, or even to where like, oh, we're just dating. This is fun.
Yeah.
Like we're dating for fun. We're hanging out, or the like non-labels and all this stuff. So I think the biggest like struggle was having to like unlearn that, and even take in those like old insecurities from old relationships, and going, but this is a different one. I can't have the same thoughts, same insecurities, because he's already shown himself that this is not a worldly thing. He's not giving me the expectation of we're having a worldly relationship, we're going to be intimate before marriage, or we're going to be, I'm not going to have a label for you or commit to you in this, that, and that way. So I think it was more of like unlearning those things, which is hard because I felt like I was wired such a certain way. And then even those expectations of not getting that godly relationship, or getting that future spouse that wants to marry you and have a future with you, I think it was being like, oh my goodness, this person actually wants to spend their life with me. That's nuts. But okay, sure. So I think it was really, that was my main thing of like a struggle, is having to unlearn that, and then even being vulnerable with having that conversation of like, hey, I only know one way of relationship. This is different for me. This is brand new and stuff. So I think that was like one of my bigger struggles for like difference of those.
Right.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think of another thing too, when it comes, and I feel like this can go for like each season, but also like I think of like what you're fixing your eyes on in that season. Like I feel like, Kristen was talking about like the busyness of life, and how it can be like a distraction, and also with summer, you have kids, and navigating ministry together and a marriage. sometimes our eyes kind of get away from the Lord unintentionally. And so I feel like even then we kind of like once our eyes kind of get off the Lord, it kind of becomes a ripple effect of like things just start to go downhill.
Yeah.
And so I think for me, a good reminder has just been like to always keep my eyes focused on the Lord. Obviously, like there are times that I fail because of distractions or busyness or just comparison or whatever is mixed in that. But I just think of Philippians 4:8, and he says like, my dear brothers and sisters, this one final thing, fix your thoughts on what is true and honorable and right and pure and lovely and admirable. Think about things that are excellent and worthy of praise. And that even makes me think of Summer when she was saying, like, you want to have a spirit of excellence in everything that you do. And so I think just going back to, like, all of our seasons, like, a good reminder is just to keep our eyes focused on Jesus. And I just want to even ask, like, because I can only speak for, like, waiting season, but as far as, like, dating or married or engaged, like, what are some of y'all's, like, biggest, I guess, like, what are your triggers, I guess, in a sense that you notice, like, you start to stray away, like, your eyes start to stray away from the Lord, if that makes sense? Like, what are some triggers or, like, maybe certain seasons within your season that cause you to, like, become, like, more distracted and kind of that stray your eyes away from the Lord that cause more of those struggles, if that makes sense?
Yeah. I think I think it's kind of has a part for every season. It's like when I realize that I might be spending time more with my partner rather than I'm spending with God.
Yeah.
And it's like having that kind of reminder for us is like God is first. He comes before your partner, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your husband, your wife, anyone. And I think it's getting distracted in that way because, it's like, you're doing life with this person and, you want to spend all your time with them and, get to know them more and do just all these fun things. But then it's going, am I spending more time with my partner than I am still intentionally spending with God? Because it's like you're planning out dates with your partner, but am I planning out time for God as well?
That's good.
Yeah. Well, that was real good.
I think that was really good. I think for me, it's just busyness. Just waking up every day. And I feel like I have this goal every single day where I'm like, today's going to be the day, or tomorrow morning is going to be the morning where I wake up at 6 o'clock and I'm going to make my coffee and spend time with the girls before they wake up. But then, the busyness of just everyday life. I wrote down some stuff: homeschool, fitness, ministry, housework, dance lessons, what's for dinner. It's like a never ending cycle of these things that we just let consume us. It's almost like I feel like this weight, as a wife and mom of like, if I don't do this stuff, then who's going to do it? And like the whole time God's just sitting there waiting.
Yeah.
And waiting for me to just be still, and I really struggle with stillness. Stillness is something that I've struggled with from, since I was little. But I have a Bible verse here that I wanted to add to this part. It's Ecclesiastes 3:1, and it's, there is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens. And I think just, as growing up, you always hear your mama say there's a time and a place for everything. Well, it's true. There really is a time and place for everything. So I just, I hope to be more intentional with that.
That's good.
Thank you.
I think for me, like, Curly works, for Face It and Renewed, like 2 ministries. So he works for ministries, shameless plug. And I don't work in ministry. I work like a secular job, and I've worked in some like really negative places, and I've let negative things just fill me instead of letting my light shine in those places.
Yeah.
And so like for me, like I can tell I get like more short or like snippy with like him, or like even with like friends, like people wanting to hang out, like I'll be like, I really just don't. I just want to be by myself, like kind of thing. So like I'll notice when I'm starting to feel like I don't really want to be by anybody, or like I don't want to talk to nobody, like that's when I'm like, okay, something's wrong. I gotta pull myself back, get with the Lord, get in my worship. Like that's my triggers.
That's good.
Those are really good ones.
That's
The
good.
job. I think everyone can aspect of like having your job or your life kind of
Yeah,
the
definitely.
negativeness kind of almost. We realize you might be bringing like the negatives home, or even like the negatives. Like I feel like sometimes I brought like my own negatives of like jobs or just even like with money or anything, even like in my prayer, like almost kind of praying in like an angry way and being like,
Yeah.
I'm letting life take my own attitude into prayer. And when I'm talking to him, and I'm like, man, I should be literally so grateful that I have a job, that I have finances, I have, you know, the ability in the life to do things. And I'm like over here being a negative in prayer, like, you know, well, I don't have all the money, Lord. What do you expect me to do? What do you expect me to do with no money?
Well, speaking of prayer, how does your prayer life change in each season? Because we're obviously, you know, we're in different seasons.
Yeah.
And so what does your prayer life look like in the season that you're in?
I will
How
say
does that change?
this is so funny that we said this because literally I brought this up with Steven the other day. We were just sitting watching our little show or whatever, and it hit me and I was like, oh my gosh, like I get to pray about a whole bunch of new things now.
Yeah.
Like, of course you pray for your future husband, you pray for your future kids and your future home, but it's like now as sitting as like being engaged, I'm going, oh my gosh, I literally get to pray for my future husband. Like I'm seeing him in my own eyes and like, oh my God, I'm praying for a home. And like those like prayers that like, you know, you're told like, you know, pray for that future stuff. I'm like, I'm getting to pray for that like now and seeing that that fruit is going to be shown in my future, you know, praying for that home, praying for the finances of being married, like all that stuff becomes like real. And I was like, man, Steven, I get to like pray about that. That's crazy. That's some crazy
Such a big
stuff.
responsibility, right?
Not scary at all.
I'll say for me, like, I don't know why, but prayer's always just been something I like struggle with, like just talking out loud. Like that's just something I've always been like real insecure about. And so since being married now, like I can't really hide in that the way I could before. Like I have someone there like keeping me accountable, like, hey, like we need to work on this. Like we need to, like, I'm gonna lead you, and when you're ready, like you do it, like kind of thing. So like I can't hide behind what I've been insecure about. Like I have someone calling me higher now. So that's how mine has shifted.
Yeah. And it's like praying as one now. Like it's
Yeah.
literally two people, which I mean, even like for an aspect for like even for you, Summer, it's like, you know, because she has the aspect of her and her husband praying, but like you have your husband and your girls. Like how is that even like in the prayer of like having the girls in that or even teaching them up in prayer in that way? I'm curious.
Right. Yeah. We pray often. We have to.
You have to. You have to.
I've actually really enjoyed this season of teaching them prayer and like what is prayer and like seeing each of their personalities. And I just love that even at their young age, you know, I have a 6-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 3-year-old. Like God is doing so much already in their lives, you know, and just hearing them, I'm trying not to get emotional. Mom, like, just hearing them like each individually at night before bed, like get into prayer and like hearing what interests them or like what's important to them and what are they praying for. I think that's been like super cool. But yeah, as far as like Daisy and I, our prayer life, just praying over them every single night. There's so much more responsibility now. It's like, you know, somebody has a bad dream and we don't realize it, but like when kids are, you know, having bad dream and like you pray a spirit of fear out in the name of Jesus, like, hey, we're getting that out.
Yeah.
I'll ask Trinity, I'll be like, Trinity, like she'll be scared. She's like, something scared me. I'm like, okay, well, what do we say to fear? And she's like, go in Jesus' name. I'm like, that's right, baby. So our prayer kind of looks like a lot like that right now. It's more like broken down and teaching. So
I would just also would love for you to record when Trinity says that next time and just have that playing all the time.
Love
Yes, Jesus, listen to Trinity. She said it.
she's a force to be reckoned with, for sure.
I love that. What about you, Jane?
Well, I think for me, I kind of like touched on it a little bit earlier, but I guess I'll like can I expound a little bit more? But you know, the struggle was asking the Lord why, and so that's kind of like where my prayers shifted as well.
Yeah.
Instead of, you know, going to the Lord in anger of like, why, Lord, why this, why that, why are you doing this, why are you taking this from me, like, why are you asking this of me? It's just focusing on, okay, Lord, like this waiting season is such a refining season. So what is it that's in my heart that needs to get out in order to prepare me for the next season?
So
Yeah,
good.
that's
And so, you know, I feel like, you know, once we ask the Lord, like what and he addresses the heart issues, then I feel like that almost kind of propels us to our next season.
Yeah.
And so for me, I've just been trying to focus my prayers on, all right, Lord, like, how do you want to refine me in this season? Like, who do you want me to become in this season? And, you know, I dream, as every woman does, like, I dream of the wife I want to be and the mother I want to be. But I'm not just going to wake up one day and be her. Like, I've got to become her. And so, you know, in order to do that, I've got to, you know, refine my heart and be put in the fire. And I've got to get this junk out so that literally, so that, you know, I can be that wife that I want to be one day and mother that I want to be one day. And so, like, my biggest thing is just focusing on the what and the waiting. Like, what are you wanting to teach me? And sometimes it's things I don't want to hear, but it's things that's necessary, because it's in that waiting that the Lord, like, disciplines me.
Yes.
And I think it's in Hebrews 12 that it says that the Lord disciplines those that he loves. You know, I like to be reminded of that, because I'm like, you know, if the Lord didn't love me, he wouldn't be disciplining me right now. And so my prayer life has to be very disciplined, and it's getting out all of the things so that I can be prepared for, you know, a dating season and you know, one day engaged and married and have a family.
Which I love that, like, praying for the what to have him answer, because I think that applies to every season. It's like getting in that moment and going, okay, yeah, I may be in this dating season and engaged and stuff like that. What are you needing me to do? What do I still need to work on before I become a wife? And it's like, when you're a wife, it's like, what do I need to do before I become a mother? And it's like, man, you're raising a generation over here. It's like, what do I need to do to prepare for the next generation? My kids to become their women and become in dating and married and find their husbands. It's like really, really cool. I think it's to focus on that what and like he has for us to answer. And I think a question is like, how has God spoken to you specifically in like your season that you've noticed, like a way that he speaks to you in your season, you know?
Well, I don't mean to do this, but I wanted to jump back on Jaden's season of waiting right now. Like, just thinking about like what all you're doing and how intentional you're being in preparation for your future husband and family. Like, I think that's so cool. Like, I know it's hard right now, but I can say from like deep dark experience, like doing it rushed and doing it the worldly way is not easy. The first 2 years of mine and Daisy's our marriage was terrible. There's like so many times that we could go back and tell you guys of stories and situations that happened between us just because we were not like rooted in Christ, and we were never taught what it meant to be rooted in Christ and like what personal identity was before marriage. Like none of that, like literally you were talking earlier about finding your identity in your relationship. That was me. Like Daisy was my everything. And so anytime we were like rocky, you know, everything about me was rocky. So I'll say that like, we're finally at a place now, 10 years in, that you could be at before you ever even met the person that God has put in your life.
That's so good.
So I think it's so like it's the waiting season is hard, but just think about like what all you get to kind of leap over that I had to kind of muddle my way through. So anyway,
good.
back to your question.
Backtrack there. No, I was asking, how have you found that God has spoken to you specifically in each of y'all's seasons, like in a specific way that he has spoken to you in your season?
That's good. I'll go. I've struggled for a really long time, just kind of bouncing off of what I just said with purpose. I feel like, I graduated high school barely, and
Barely.
I went into college and I dropped out.
Same.
I went into hair school actually. Dropped out of hair school, lived on my own, lived the party life, got back into school finally finished. My mom was so proud, she's like, finally we made it. And wow, I lost my train of thought.
You were going through it and you were like, man, look how far I've
Has this ever
come.
happened to you guys? What was the question again?
How has God spoken to you in your season?
purpose.
Here
we go.
Hey, you were just thinking about all the
I
things you've been through.
was,
Look how far
I
you've
was.
come.
And immediately after that, after college, partying, I'm married all of a sudden. Don't have any idea of like what it means to be married, finances, all of that's brand new to me. And I've always kind of just battled like, what is my purpose? I did hair for a little while, and then finally, whenever I built up enough clientele to put gas in my car, started having kids. And we had kids like back to back to back. It wasn't like I had a kid and then 5 years later I had another kid. Like, I have a 6-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 3-year-old. Like, we was having kids. So,
We was having kids.
so I've always,
wasted
I
no
feel
time.
like I'm always in this struggle of what is my purpose? And I've struggled with that for so long. And I, I had to really kind of back up from social media for a while because I felt like social media, the act of comparison, I felt like I was constantly comparing myself to other people, and I felt like a burden to Daisy. Like, he's doing all the work and I'm just home with all these kids, and it's like I didn't really do good in high school. I barely finished college. I got married. I started having kids. Like, God, what is my purpose?
Yeah.
And I'm learning finally now, like, that all of this, even though it was terrible and I should have waited, all of this has been leading me to my actual purpose, which is right now. Like,
Yeah, I
your
love that.
current season is your purpose. You can find purpose in where God has you right now. So I'm just
Yeah, that's
learning
good.
how to navigate, the here and the now, and not listening to what the world thinks about me, but what does God say about me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's good.
I really love that. That's really good.
And I love that you first talked about purpose, because that's what I was going to say too. Is like that's been the biggest thing that the Lord's been teaching me. And also, like, something that he's been speaking to me is like, how do you want to be found in this season? And so, like, in my season of waiting, like, how do I want to be found? Like, how do I want to be found by the Lord? And how do I want to be found by my future husband?
Yeah.
And for me to answer that, like, I want to be found by being busy for the kingdom.
Yeah.
And when I think of the story of Ruth and Boaz, like, Boaz found Ruth working in the field. Like, she was found working and busy for the kingdom. And so that's how I want to be found. And so, however that looks like, whether that's serving, and helping in youth ministry, or if that's just simply working a secular job, or, going through that refining process, whatever it is, like, I just want to be found serving well and by being busy for the kingdom. So
That's good.
That's good.
that's how the Lord speaks to me.
Looking for a Boaz.
I think right now for me, something that I've been trying to learn is just like stripping my pride, because I grew up like an independent girl. Like, I did my stuff. I was disciplined. I did my schoolwork. I liked school. Like, I went.
We probably wouldn't have been friends at all.
Probably not.
You probably would have been cheating off her baby.
But so like I've grown up independent. Even like in dating, like I was independent, and what I was doing, he was independent in what he was doing, and like we just like came together hanging out. And so like in marriage, like I'm not just independent anymore. Like
Yeah, that's good.
I'm with my husband. Like, I can't just run everything by myself. Like, and I sat in one of the MTI classes here, and Brother Johnny was talking about like submission. And like, of course, I've heard of submission before, but it always had this like misconception to it of like, okay, when you get married, like your husband makes all the rules.
He's
Like,
the boss.
he does everything. And like, in a way, yes, but
Right.
in context, like, he's protecting your family. Like, he's the leader of your family. And so what he was talking about was, if you look at like the hierarchy of like your, like, what am I saying? The hierarchy of protection. That's what it is.
Yeah.
So like your husband is directly under God. Like his leader is God and like his spiritual authority. And so when you become a wife, like your husband is like who's leading you, and you're trusting that he's following the Lord. And so when you have kids, like your kids submit to their parents, you know, until they go get married and have their own families. And so we were talking about that earlier. Like Summer sent me some pages from a book, and she sent me a page that had 1 Corinthians 11:3. And so I wanted to read that. Sorry.
That's good. It's okay.
It says, "But there's one thing I want you to know. The head of every man is Christ. The head of woman is man, and the head of Christ is God." And so for me, like, I'm learning that I'm not Miss Independent and I can't have all this pride in me all the time, and that I have to, like, really take myself down and be like, okay, I do have a leader of my family.
Yeah.
Like, I do have to, like, communicate with him and be with him in our decisions. Like,
Right.
it's not just me.
Yeah.
I think there's a big misconception of like what true submission is.
Yes.
I think a lot of times like girls in the world are, it's just like, hey, I'm not going to submit to anybody. Like, you know, I am who I am. But I think even for Christian wives and partners, I think it's very important to understand that when you submit to your husband, you're actually submitting to God
Yeah.
because it's
good.
biblical. You know, and it's like God wants you to trust him because there's order and he has a specific order that everything's supposed to be in. And when we fall naturally into that order and we submit to our husbands, which realistically is ultimately submitting to God, you know, things just naturally fall into place. So I love that. And I think that's really
I
good.
love that we talk about that because I feel like it is such a thing that is pushed more and more, and I think, you know,
Yeah.
will be pushed continuously over and over for girls, like that over independent thing that, you know, not needing a guy, not needing a man who needs them, blah 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 blah. It's almost like hating men almost in
Yeah.
that way, but it's like having like some, like, even talking about submitting to someone is like the worst thing to tell a woman and everything. So I love that we talked about that because
Yeah.
it's so important to kind of remind people of today, like, it is biblical to
Yeah.
submit to your husband, you know. And of course it's always, you know, that can be abused in that way. Of course, you know, the husband can abuse the wife in those
Right.
situations, but it's like it's still biblical, and there's so much fruit that comes from submitting to your husband because you are submitting to God.
Right.
So I think it's so good to emphasize
And a
that.
generation of girls that are not, or wives that are not submitting to their husbands leaves a generation of kids that are left in the world. And like when we submit to our husbands, right, we're bringing order into the next generation. We're teaching them. If we don't submit to our own husbands, then what do you think the next generation is going to do?
Yeah.
So it's like super important.
I like that. I also wanted
My
to,
poor kids.
poor kids.
I'm working on it,
for-
Daisy.
They got it going. For me, how God speaks to me, I love that y'all both talked about purpose and you talked about independency. And that was like my kind of thing. Together a little bit, but kind of for me was how God really spoke to me in my relationship. Like I said before, I mentioned that, you know, I only knew one way of a relationship, only knew of a worldly way of a relationship before, and so I was that worldly mindset girl of I don't need a man, I don't need a relationship and everything. I'm fine on my own. I can do it all on my own. You know, I don't need to be vulnerable. And I think with my independency, it squashed all my vulnerability with people.
Yeah.
And of course, that affected me in all relationships, but especially with, like, you know, in a boyfriend and girlfriend aspect. Like, I was so afraid of being vulnerable with another person who, you know, they can see my weaknesses and insecurities and everything, and they know what I'm struggling with. And it's almost like I felt like the moment I was vulnerable with that person, it would be exploited. Like, it'd be taken away from me.
Yeah.
And in the past, it had before happened, you know, I had been vulnerable and my innocence got taken away. And so that was such, like, also in that kind of like enemy, like, stamping that.
Yeah.
So I think with my relationship now, like, we've even had conversations, like, me and Steven, about, like, you know, especially in the beginning stages of our relationship, with, like, kind of him, like, talking to me in my vulnerability of, like, hey, you know, I want you to be vulnerable with me. You know, I don't, you know, you can't connect in a way if you're putting up a wall. And it's so true. Like, I can't connect with someone if I'm only letting them get, like, this far, and I'm going, all right, that's it. That's
Yeah.
as much as you can go.
Yeah.
And it's still that struggling with that independency of, you know, I can deal with my problems on my own. I don't need you to help me. I don't need you to be there for me. I will deal with it myself. And so I think the independency created that, like, fear of vulnerability. And I think now it's like how God speaks to me is in my vulnerability, to be vulnerable with Stephen and even my family and my friends. Like, me 2 years ago, or even really a year ago, I couldn't even do that. And so I just love that God has met me in my vulnerableness, and to encourage that with others.
Yeah,
and
that's
being
good.
like, take down the walls. Be real with people. You know, it's okay to be undone and to be, you know, struggling, or, you know, insecure and have those weaknesses. Like,
Yeah.
you're not supposed to be perfect.
Hmm.
And so I think that was like a really big thing of how God spoke to me and met me there in my relationship and my season.
That's good.
That's good.
Good.
If anyone else wants to add to that. I think for all of us to kind of go around and speak about like some like pivotal things about your season that you can kind of speak to others about, like something that, Jaden, your season, and Summer, and Kristen, and mine, that, we can really focus on in our season and tell people if there's like a certain thing that y'all kind of want to put in that and share. A certain point or like just something that y'all have.
Yeah. Well, something I had been thinking about in just a few scriptures that I wrote down, but just one thing that I want to say was how to, because you may be wondering, like, how do you keep Christ the center? Genuinely keep Christ the center of each and every one of our seasons, And so for me personally, and being in a waiting season, how I want to keep Christ the center is I touch on a few of these things, is by, keeping my eyes fixed on the Lord. Because the moment I take my eyes off of him, that's where the distractions come and the comparison comes, And like you were saying earlier, Ellen, how you made the point of, if you can't be secure in the Lord, then you're not going to be secure in a relationship. And so not only do I want to fix my eyes on the Lord, but I want to be so secure in the Lord and knowing who I am and so busy at work for the kingdom that whenever I am found, by a godly man, and I am, dating, engaged, and married, I'm not shaken when things come because I'm so secure in the Lord and my eyes have been so fixed on him, and I've been so saturated in his presence and his love. But I also just want to read, because this has been like a key scripture that has carried me over the last 3 years of waiting, Isaiah 40:31. And some of the translations say those who hope in the Lord and those who trust in the Lord, which I love both of those translations. But the New King James says, but those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. Yeah. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. And even something that I've kind of got the revelation of, what does it mean to mount up on wings like an eagle? When you think of an eagle, like they fly above, they fly above and they're able to look down. So it's like, for me, that was a thing of, if I'm going to mount up on wings like an eagle, that means I've got to have a heavenly perspective. So if I'm going to have a heavenly perspective, that means my eyes have to be fixed on Jesus.
Yeah, that's really
and
good.
So just to encourage anyone who's in a waiting season of, waiting for a relationship, or if you're in a relationship and waiting to be engaged, or if you're engaged waiting to be married, or if you're married and waiting to have children, like I feel like waiting isn't just a season, but it's a lifestyle, because we're always waiting on the Lord. And so wherever you're at in your waiting, I think just an encouragement would be Isaiah 40:31 is to genuinely wait on the Lord, and in that waiting, keep your eyes fixed on him and be so rooted in the Lord that when you finally receive what you're waiting for, you're not shaken.
Yes.
And you're able to see things from a heavenly perspective, because when you can see things from heaven, you have that strength to run and not grow weary, and that strength to walk and not grow faint.
I love that. That's so good.
That's good. Is it my turn?
Anyways, turn.
Just so I guess my season would be modeling a godly marriage and honoring God in front of my kids. So a verse that I highlighted was Proverbs 22:6. We've all heard this one. Start children off in the way they should go, and even when they are old, they will not turn from it. That verse is so true for me, because my poor little mom, she prayed for me so much, growing up, just over the years, that I would turn out to be godly and have a godly husband. And I think all of our prayers have been answered with that, for sure. I couldn't ask for a better husband, but I think it's important just to model repentance in front of my children. I think that I struggled for a long time with not liking to mess up in front of them, or feeling like a failure. Like, it's one thing to feel like a failure, to the world, or even to your husband is the next step, but to feel like a failure to your kids, that was really hard for me. So something that I've been trying to work on lately is just modeling repentance and letting them know, like, hey, we're human. We're all going to mess up. And, you know, but this is what we can do to, like, navigate that. And also just, like, trying to love and honor their dad no matter what. That's so important, you know, making sure that, when you don't have kids, it's so easy to just, like, strangle him, you know what I mean?
Oh my
But
goodness.
realistically,
Davey's gonna love this
I'm
podcast.
gonna love it. Realistically, like, what are we showing our kids? Like, I have 3, not boys, which boys are important too, but I have 3 little girls that are watching me every single day, watching how I talk to their dad, watching how I submit to their dad. You know what I mean? Like, it's, like, so important. So I think that's just kind of where I'm at right now in my walk, is just, like, that and modeling repentance and letting them know that it's okay to, you know, be your true, authentic self as long as, you know, God is at the center.
And I will add to your thing is, like, especially seeing, you know, when I'm with Face It Ministries and I go to the schools with them, you see so much and know exactly how their home life is by the way the kid acts sometimes. Like, you know that there's not always a mom and a dad at the home, or a mom and dad that love each other in that way, because they don't know that. They don't see that example. And so for you to, like, to say that and to, you know, talk about yourself being human in front of your kids and showing the love and repentance even with your husband, it's like, that's so good, because your children are going to model their future relationships off of y'all. You're going to model your relationship off of your parents. You know, if it's good or bad, it's like one of those things of unlearning the bad relationships or focusing on that good relationship that your parents had and going, I want that for my future.
Yeah.
And so that's, like, really, really, really awesome to hear. And to just, for those, like, parents out there, it's like, that's so good, because your kids are seeing all of it. And they're like sponges, I'm sure. They grasp onto everything.
100%.
They grasp onto
All the
everything.
things.
All of it. So it's so good to have that, especially as a Christian marriage in that way, because especially how the world teaches people of relationships. I think it's going so far against Christian relationships with the submitting, the vulnerability, the purpose in the relationship. I feel like we're going so far away from it in the world and what we are seeing, that it's so good that we are able to focus on those relationships that do exist, Christian foundational relationships. Add that to yours.
I'll say, for me, I can probably sum mine up in these 2 verses. For me, like, in a newly married season, I looked at Ephesians 5:33, and it says, "So again I say, each man must love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband." And then again, Ephesians 5:21 says, "And further submit to one another out of reverence for Christ." So it's really just about respecting each other. And like you mentioned with the triangle, like, the closer you get to God, the closer you get to each other. So in a newly married season, like, we're still navigating that we're not 2 independent people, like, we're one now.
Yeah, that's
And so we're merging 2 lives together. And so I think that's really the sum of, like, a newly married season for me.
That's really good.
Blacked out.
No, for me, I kind of wanted to focus back on a little what I said earlier about the focusing. Sometimes I feel like with dating, you know, you get in that honeymoon phase and, you know, you're falling in love with someone and it's amazing and it's great and you're so excited, that I feel like sometimes you can almost put your partner on a pedestal. And that, again, like how I was saying a little bit earlier, of, you know, not spending as much time with God as I'm spending with my partner. And, you know, for me, it's like, I don't ever want to put Stephen in the pedestal that God's in, because I know that's not something that he can fulfill. I can't fulfill God's position in Stephen's life. He can't fulfill God's position in my life, you know, and I can't have those expectations. But I think when you get in, kind of like, very much I see it a lot when people get, like, it's almost like obsessed with their relationship, you know, the status of being with someone and having that person. You're, like, obsessed with your partner. Everything they do in your life, you have to do everything with them, and you're glued to their hip and stuff. So I think for that, it's a really important thing to talk about when dating, is, like, you know, that God is always going to be first. He will always be before your partner, even in marriage with kids. It's like, he has to be first, or it's, you know, it's going to be rocky. It's going to be, it's going to be a little troubled. And so I wanted to share the verse of Matthew 22:37. It says, Jesus replied, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. And I think that's just a great verse to put on of truly having that mindset that loving him with all of me and everything. And because I love him with all of him, I'm able to love someone. I'm able to have someone in my life and do life with. Because it's also a thing is, how do I know how to love someone if I don't know God?
Yeah.
Because God is love. Like,
Right.
how do I know what love is if I don't have him in my life? And then also, I think what a really important thing that I think me and Steven did, even when we first started dating, of course, bring back those ice buckets, we call them, is having those tough conversations. You know, we joke
Yes.
around with the tough conversations. Oh, you know, the ice buckets, throwing an ice bucket there and ice bucket there. But I think having those tough conversations even before you're dating or while you're dating is so important, that you're having it, you're talking about it, you're resolving
Yeah,
it, and
that's
you're
good.
bringing it to God, so it's not coming up in marriage.
Yep.
It's not coming up and going on to your children. And so I think those are really, really, really important, in how I kind of talked about earlier, like talking about our past.
Yes.
You know, my past is not this lovely thing that I love sharing and just talking about. Like, there's convictions of my past that me and Steven had conversations about. And, you know, even with him, it's like having those conversations, having the conversations of expectation and boundaries on the relationship, I think is so important. And of course, we did that in our 90-day commitment of, hey, these are the boundaries we're setting already before we even start dating.
Yeah.
You know, we're not going to cross these boundaries. We had rules on our relationship. You know, we're not going to be alone somewhere, just me and you. Like, we're not going to be putting ourselves in situations that we're going to be tempted. Like, why would we set ourselves up to fail? Of course, you know, intimacy is always off the table in a godly relationship. We want to have a relationship victory.
Yeah.
And I think that's like a common thing for all of us, is like having that relationship in victory. Even like for like you, Summer, y'all said that y'all didn't have that godly relationship when you first started marriage, but y'all have that, and it's so strong now. And it's like the enemy loves to take that away.
Yes.
Like, he would not want you to raise your daughters seeing you submit to your husband or seeing you as a godly woman. And so I think it's so important to remember those things, that the enemy always wants to take those victories away from us. The victories in the waiting season, the engagement, the marriage with children. It's like the enemy wants to take away.
Yeah.
So
And just jump into what you're talking about, like the tough conversations in the beginning of a relationship. Like, I've talked to friends, like single friends before, that were like, I don't want to have those conversations with guys on the first date, because it's like, you know, they're going to think I'm weird, or it's like, what if they reject me? But in my mind, it's like, what if they reject you?
yeah, you
It's
got it
better
done.
for them to reject you right now
Yeah, that's
than
good.
to go, you know, 15 years into marriage and then you're rejected over and over and over again. That's not a good thing, you know. So
That's good.
I would just say to the ladies that that it is very, very, very important that you do set boundaries and that you do have those hard conversations right off the bat, because that's the whole, you're building a foundation for the rest of your life.
Yes.
And I think that's important. That trumps everything. We don't care about making them think that we're weird or scaring them off, or because if they think you're weird now, once again, it's like you're not looking for somebody to hang out with. You're looking for someone to spend the rest of your life with. And I think that's so important. We got to get past the shyness of, I don't want them to think, you know, a certain way because I brought up my non-negotiables on our first date. I think that's crucial to a godly marriage and
Also,
relationship.
just to show a sureness of yourself, that you are putting that foundation down of going, these are my boundaries. I'm not going to negotiate on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, you're so showing so much. That's a lot of words to say. Showing so much sureness of yourself.
Yeah.
That's a big word for Elmo.
It's really a lot of words. But you are showing that, and I think that's also just, again, the confidence you get from God from that. And like, I have the confidence of Him in me. These are my boundaries. These are my non-negotiables.
We call it the 5 non-negotiables.
Okay.
Yep. So, Jaden, what would your 5 non-negotiables be?
Oh my gosh, put me on the spot. No, but I was going to also say, because, you know, you kind of charge the ladies, but also, like, kind of going back to Kristen, And what she was talking about as far as like submitting to her husband, I just kind of want to charge the men too, you know, like, you know, men are, you know, men are supposed to, you know, be the head of the household and to lead. So like even in a dating relationship, like men should be leading. And so like don't wait for your girl to like bring up the boundaries. Like you as a man, you lead the relationship and you lead the hard and tough conversations of, hey, these are our boundaries and this is what we're sticking to, you know, and these are my standards, and putting in the effort to, you know, have these tough conversations rather than waiting for your girl to be like, hey, so let's get down to the nitty gritty, you know?
Yeah.
But still, you know, as a girl, you should still want to, like Summer was saying, like, you know, make sure you're having those tough conversations because you would rather have these conversations now rather than years down the line and everything is crashing and burning because you didn't have the conversations. But I just want to make sure that the ladies and the guys know
Are challenged.
you are challenged. You have to have these tough conversations. And men, it is your responsible to lead.
And women will follow.
And women will follow.
Pay
They
attention,
want to
Daisy.
be led. Pay attention, Daisy. Daisy's gonna just like
Shots
love this
fired.
episode. He's like, what did you say about me? I think adding to the having the tough conversations, I had like this little like saying that anytime like I hear about relationships, talk about relationships, it's always in the back of my head, and I think it's an important thing of communication equals comprehension. And I think we're so focused a lot these days about communicating, which is really good because the communication is important. It is a foundation of your relationship to be able to communicate what's going on with you and your partner. But I think comprehension is not as talked about because if you communicate, you can communicate all day your problems, but if the person on the other hand is not comprehending that and taking action, then where are you going?
Yeah, that's good.
And I think that's a tough conversation to have in the beginning is we're having communication and we're going to be having comprehension. In that.
Yeah.
So good.
So good. So we're going to wrap up this lovely episode. So for everyone who is watching, we are so happy that you came and watched us today. We're so happy that we're honored here to take over the girls episode.
Finally taken
I
over.
know. 2 months we've been waiting. And hopefully you like us like so much more than the guys. You should bombard their comments.
Like, share.
All of that stuff. Like, let them know that we are better.
On all streaming platforms.
All streaming platforms, yes. Please like, comment, share with others, and thank you so much for watching. Yeah!